date is August 25th, 2008, and we're in Clarksville, Arkansas, doing an interview for the Arkansas Korean War Project for the Butler Center for Arkansas Studies.
Yeah, my name is Ronald H. Van Buren, and I'm 78 years old, and I currently live in Clarksville.
Ronald, can you tell me a little bit about just your background, where you were born, where you grew up, who your parents were, that sort of stuff?
Well, I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. My parents were Eugene Van Buren and Sarah Junker, her maiden name. I was in Louisville until I graduated from high school, 1948, and then I went to Terre Haute, Indiana, where my two brothers were going to school. Both who were veterans were going to school at Rose Holman, and I needed a job, so I joined the Army.
Yeah. So your two brothers, they were World War II veterans?
Yes, my oldest brother, he's 6 years older than I am. He was joined the Marines, and he came back and told us all about the Marines. And my middle-sized brother, he joined the Navy, and he came back and told us all about the Navy, so I joined the Army.
So that makes sense.
Three brothers for sure. I don't know how it happened.
Sometimes that's the way it works out.
True.
So did you join up right out of high school, or how did that work?
Well, it was all right. In 1948, it was only 3 years since the Second World War was over, and all those GIs came back, and there weren't any jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, I had to make a living.
Right.
And one thing about the Army, you had a place to sleep and somebody to feed you, so I did it. $79 a month, too. Big money.
So you joined up in 48. Where did you go from there? Where did you have basic training and any other training, stateside training at least?
They sent me to Fort Bliss, Texas. Actually, not Fort Bliss. It was Research and Development Division, Sub-Office Rocket. That's where I took my basic training.
Uh-huh.
As a matter of fact, we were stationed at the Beaumont Hospital Annex, and believe it or not, 2 barracks down was where Werner von Braun and his Germans that came over from Peenemünde.
Wow.
They were testing the V-2 rockets out at White Sands.
Uh-huh.
As a matter of fact, we even went out there one day to see them. But I took my basic training at Fort Bliss. And when I joined up, they asked me what service I wanted. I said I wanted the Armored, mainly because I had 2 friends of mine from Louisville, Monty and Billy Eldridge, that were in the Army there, and I wanted to go to the Army with them. But lo and behold, I went to the Armored, but it happened to be instead of the 3rd Armored Division at Fort Knox, it was the 5th Armored Division at Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. I stayed there, headquarters company, and I guess I did some of the first silk screen printing ever done. I'd go down to Fort Smith and buy silk, and at that time the stuff was lacquer on a background, and you took a pen and you cut out what you wanted to print. And we printed the general orders and the decals to go on their helmets and everything. Well, they decided, I guess, that they were going to close Chaffee down. I don't think they ever did, but they said they were going to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they shipped me to Japan.
Okay.
But that's the reason I ended up being an Archie. Right.
Now, did you, while you were at Camp Chaffee, was there anything else going on? Did you had mentioned before your first wife. Did you meet her while you were here in Arkansas?
Yes. Matter of fact, a bunch of us had gone up to Paris and up to Spring Lake to go swimming. And my sergeant down there, Lucky Moody, had married Laura Crossnow of Paris, and he was living there. And so when we got ready to leave, well, I was with Lucky and his bunch. He had brought us out. Laura said, "I'd like you to meet someone." And she introduced me to Carolyn June Horn, who was, Parisian. She was a nurse at the hospital.
Huh.
I've always had an affinity for nurses anyway.
So you said you got sent to Japan. Do you remember roughly when that was? Would that have been 49 or maybe 50?
They sent me to Japan on December 49. Went to Japan, and when I first got there, they sent me to GHQ, Headquarters and Service Group, General Headquarters, which is about headquarters as you can get. Well, General MacArthur's bunch. And I was in the Sanshin building, Daiichi building, the Daiichi building there. And then, let's see, I was only there, 2 months. Because in February, then they sent me down to the southern island of Kyushu to the 24th Division, 19th Regiment. And all I did down there was we were building bachelor's officers' quarters for the officers there on Japanese property, and it was my duty to get that done. And I made some good friends over there too. Matter of fact, over there on the wall, you'll see a calligraphy that Ono Kikuo-san made me when I left there. We got to be real good friends.
That's nice. That's really pretty. So you were in Japan, I guess, during the 1950, obviously, and so you remember where you were when you heard about the North Koreans invading South Korea?
Well, yes, I was with the 19th Regiment there, and when we heard about it, I'd gotten married while I was at Chaffee before they sent me over there, and I had applied for hardship discharge because my wife was pregnant, and they had approved it. And anyway, they took me then and sent me to Yokohama, and I got on and off that boat twice, so I finally got on the third time before they sent me home. They sent me home, and while I was waiting to be discharged, President Truman signed the national emergency. And so when I walked up expecting to get a discharge, I got a "Thank you for serving in the United States Army. You are transferred to the inactive reserve." But they sent me home. Got home. About a month later, they transferred me from the inactive reserve to the active reserve. And less than a month later, they transferred me from the inactive reserve to active duty. And that's when they sent me over to Korea.
So that would have been August, September, somewhere around there?
Let's see. September the 3rd, 50 was when I was ordered to active duty.
Okay. And so you went back to Japan?
No, went back
straight to Korea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Landed at Incheon. The funny part about it is I don't know why there was such a big hullabaloo about the Marines taking Incheon. The only thing I remember was Bob Hope was there then, and he had a program there like he was so good about doing. And he told a joke about the Marine that asked, we were cavalry, first cavalry, and asked us where our horses were, and said that the trooper said, well, we had to eat them waiting for you. So that went over fine with the first cab, but I don't think the Marines that were there appreciated that too much.
Probably didn't like that too much. So do you know when the war finally started? I don't know that you. Now, where were you? Would you have been you've been back here in July when the war actually started?
No. Let's see. I didn't get back here till July 26th.
Okay.
So it started as 5 days across the ocean. So
Right.
I left there the 21st. I don't know
Right.
when the war actually started.
Yeah, I think it was June, the end of June.
Yeah. So I didn't leave Japan till the 20th or 21st of July.
So when
Because
you
I knew they had already started pushing back.
right, so when you got back here briefly, do you remember much about what people were thinking about Korea, or were they thinking anything at all as far as the
No.
non-military people, just
Well, I
civilians?
don't know about the military people. I was only a PFC, but
Right.
no, the people that back home.
Probably didn't even know
they
where
didn't
Korea
know, they
was.
Didn't know, first place, didn't know where Korea was, and I don't know. It just I guess after the Second World War, that people were just tired of war or something. I don't know what's true, but no, it was nobody. Matter of fact, I believe the only time I ever got crosswise my beloved father-in-law, D. Horn, when I was in Korea and the coal miners went on strike. And that kind of rubbed me upside down, but I got them.
Yeah.
But no, people over here just went on with their daily life, kind of like they're doing now.
Exactly. I was just thinking that, as a matter of fact. So you got, it was September of 50 when you arrived in Korea.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, it was September the 3rd was when I was ordered active duty. So probably a week later I was over there.
Okay.
Because probably a little longer, because we went by ship. We landed at Yokohama. They drove us off. They gave us a rifle and 5 clips of ammunition. Took us out to the firing range and had us zero in our rifles to make sure that they were good. Then they put us back on shore ship and took us around Busan.
Wow.
So they were quick.
Yeah.
Well, they were needing people.
Oh yeah, they were really needing people back then. So do you remember kind of any of your first thoughts when you arrived in Korea? Was there, did you have any expectations, or did you know anything about it, or?
I didn't. Well, yes, I knew from Japan that there was bad blood between Japan and Korea because Japan had occupied Korea. The funny part about it was when I was over there, we had some Hawaiians with us that spoke Japanese. Of course, there were a bunch of Japanese in Hawaii, and they spoke Japanese. We used them as interpreters. They also, and the Koreans would act like they never understood Japanese. We knew they did, but they were so upset about the occupation.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
No, until I got up with the guns. The only thing I knew then was scared. But no, I didn't have a idea of what was going to be. I was young.
Right. Very much so, yeah. So, you remember much about kind of just how the unit operated, in the sense of, did you ever have any problems with supplies, or how the logistics of everything, did that go off pretty well, or?
We were short of men. We had each gun crew had a rock, a Korean soldier, Republic of Korea soldier rock, to augment the people to run the gun. We also, like I said, one time, I think back here the Chinese had accused us of using gas or something, and but actually what we'd done, we'd run out of high explosive shells, and all we had left was white phosphorus, which was even worse than anything. And what we used that for was fire for effect. You'd fire, and the forward observer would see that white phosphorus where it was, and they said you need to be so much this way or so much out this way or something. But that's all we had left, because we didn't use valves very often. Also, we were short of material. I wrote home for warm socks and warm gloves. My wife sent me a pair of leather gloves with a finger out like this, sheepskin lined. She found them in Paris.
Huh.
And some of those gray wool socks. Oh, wonderful. But actually, we just didn't have enough of anything.
Right.
We weren't ready for the war. That's entirely what it was.
So what kind? You said your guns. What kind of guns did you all operate?
Well, these were 105 howitzers. So howitzer 105, about 4-inch diameter. There were 6 of them to a battery. I was with C battery. You always had to have angle fire because of the mountains over there. So as a result, every time we pulled into an area, the first thing they did was build a parapet around the gun for incoming stuff. And then the next thing to do, they had to dig a big pit, because those guns were at such a high angle that when the recoil hit, recoil it couldn't hit the ground, because if it did, it jumped the gun, and then you'd be off of the target again. Also, the one thing I do remember was charge. As I was in fire patrol for a while, they'd say charge 7, fuse quick. Shell HE, high explosive, charge 7. Well, when the artillery came with 7 bags of powder linked by threads. So 8. And if you were at charge 7, you lifted it up 1 and broke it off.
Okay. And
that changed how hard. Or charge 5 or whatever it was, and then of course determine the azimuth and the elevation. But you always dug a parapet around it because of incoming nail.
Right.
But they were 105. We had 6 guys pulling them. That's where the ammunition was. And they also pulled a caisson that had ammunition in it. And the shells came with no fuse. So you had to screw the fuse in and then put the shell where you decided the charge with the shell and then load it in. And that's where it came in handy with those rocks, because man, they were tough boys.
Yeah. So what exactly was your job at that point?
Well, at that point, for a little while, I was manned the phone. We laid a wire to each one of the guns so that we could give them the instructions, and I did that until they decided they needed an outpost sergeant, and I was a PFC. So then for I don't know, I guess a couple of 3 months, I was in charge of setting these outposts out with machine guns to protect the battery in case we had guerrillas that came in. And then they needed a medic, so I became the medic.
That sounds good. So, do you remember much of, I'm sure you know the history of the war much better than I do, but with the North Koreans invading and, kind of pushing everybody south, and then with the Incheon landing, there's kind of a breakout, and the Allied United Nations forces start pushing north across the 38th parallel. Do you remember much about that time period of what was going on then?
Yeah. Most of it wasn't memorable.
Yeah.
One thing I do remember, when we crossed the 38th parallel, some joker had written a sign that said, "You are now crossing the 38th parallel, compliments of the whatever army deal it was." And then when we came back with our tail on fire, and it said, "You are now recrossing the 38th parallel, compliments of the 1st Chinese Army." That's about all. The rest of it was, forgetful.
Right. So do you, talking about the retreat after, the Allied forces moved north and, got close to the Yalu, and then Chinese got involved, do you have any thoughts or feelings about, the Chinese getting involved? And, a lot of people have kind of laid the blame at that with MacArthur, about that he kind of provoked them, in the sense that he went so far north. But
I disagree there. Of course, I'm a PFC. I mean,
Right.
I was a small. I wasn't even a spoke,
right.
much less a wheel. But the only thing I do remember, and that I do hold against MacArthur, he had the best PR section, public relations section there was. And anytime he could say we took 2 miles or 3 miles or 5 miles, that was feathering his cap. Well, the only problem with that was that 2 miles was up the valley.
Mm-hmm.
The mountaintops back here still had people in the caves.
Mm-hmm.
And even our MASH units, because I'd have to, when I was a medic, I'd have to sometimes have to go back with a helicopter to the MASH unit. Even our MASH units had to carry sidearms, and they had to have, because they'd come down off the mountain after they'd gone up.
Mm-hmm.
And he just, terrible.
Right.
Well, when they finally got rid of MacArthur and got General Ridgway, he might not take 100 yards, but when we took 100 yards, it was ours.
Yeah.
And then we got where we didn't worry about what was behind us.
Right.
I mean, worrying about what's in front of you is bad enough.
I
Worrying
can
about what's
imagine.
behind you. That's no good.
Yeah. So, do you remember too much about, once after the Chinese got involved and then kind of started pushing the Allied forces back, kind of the retreat? Do you have any memories of what that was like? And
Well, of course, you never like to be whooped, but it's just, and they weren't as far advanced as our army was, but they had just jillions of people, it seemed like. We'd be on the hill down there, and I'd be up with the outpost on top of it, and they'd start up the hill, and half of their soldiers didn't have guns. They'd have to wait till somebody got killed before they'd get them a gun.
mm-hmm.
Their idea of human life was nothing.
Right.
They're expendable.
Right. Yeah.
While we tried our daggondest to save our fellow soldiers,
mm-hmm.
they didn't seem to care.
Right.
No, it's when you're got your tail on fire and you're running. Anytime you have 105 howitzers and you fire them by bore sighting them,
mm-hmm.
it ain't good.
Mm-hmm.
By bore sighting, I mean what you do is you open the breech, you look down the barrel,
right.
You put a shell in, and you fire. Well, if you can look down the barrel and see what you're firing at, and you're a 105 howitzer, you're in the wrong place.
Exactly. I would think so.
Yes.
Yeah. So, do you remember much about the weather in Korea? Kind of reminds me of that.
I remember the weather. The winter. Well, in the first place, you take rice paddies and mountains is all there was. Mountains full of snow and ice, and the rice paddies solid ice. And then, like I say, until we got almost through with winter, we didn't even have enough clothes. Thanks to my wife, I did have,
mm-hmm.
and the other fellows too. But yeah, the weather was deathly cold. There was a minus 40-degree wind chill factor at times.
Wow.
And I do know that when you stood guard at night, you were 1 hour on and 2 hours off,
mm-hmm.
because you couldn't stand a long shift of that.
Right.
And even then, some of us stood guard or sat guard in our sleeping bag, zipped down with our rifle.
Uh-huh.
It was just cold. You just couldn't do anything.
I sort of say I can only imagine how hard it would be to operate in.
That's true. And I remember we finally got off the C rations. We were on B rations, and the mess truck was parked there. And we went up with our mess kits to get breakfast. And I went by, and they piled cornflakes in my mess kit. And they had powdered milk mixed up on the burner. And they put a couple of tablespoons of sugar on it, and then they took a ladle and they piled that red hot milk in that. And you walked off and you ate it while you were walking. Because half the time, by the time you got far enough away to get it finished, it was already turned to ice.
Wow.
So it just, and trying to, even when you had C rations, when it was so cold that you could put the we drained hot water out of the Jeep radiator, put in our helmet, and then try to heat those cans of sea rations. And even then, they'd have a piece that big in the middle of it that was frozen. So
Wow.
that miserable. And that was the most miserable part of Korea was the winter. There was plenty of that.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, you said that for a while, you worked as a medic. Can you tell anything about your experiences with the MASH units? Of course, most people today, if they think and I emphasize if they think
TV.
anything about the Korean
War. Don't mention
War.
that to me. That was a farce.
Yeah.
I wouldn't watch it then. I won't watch it now. And I don't. No, that's a farce.
Yeah.
I only went back several times, and that was only when the person that put them on the back in those days, your helicopters were bells. They were plexiglass bubble with some pipe sticking out, and they put them on the side on the deal that they landed on. And if it had to have a transfusion or something while they were going back there, then I would ride with them. So I didn't go back there probably 6 or 7 times, and then it would just drop them off. They'd take them, and we'd go back up the front. I didn't have much. I do know that. No, I won't tell that story. I did scrounge some deal of penicillin from the MASH, unbeknownst to the lieutenant. And when some of the boys got into sold what there was left of it, somehow or other got troubles. And of course, before you could go home, you had to be clean medically. And so I would help them to go home. And the only other thing I remember about it, there was 934 men in the battery. 99th Field Artillery Battalion, in the battalion. And me and a Korean and a lieutenant started in giving shots. I had a shot, and of course an officer had to sign the shot record. I gave the shot, and then I took the needle off and handed it to the Korean, and he had a whetstone. Well, over about a 3 or 4 day period, I gave 934 shots, and boy, those last bunch, I'll tell you, I felt for them because those needles were. Anyway, I remember that. That was a sad state of affair.
I can imagine that would not be too pleasant. Why don't we take a little break right now, and we will pick back up in just a minute.
Okay.
And we're starting back on our interview with Ron Van Buren, and one thing I wanted to ask you, Ron, was I know a lot of guys had the opportunity to take leave during the war. Some of them went to Japan and maybe to Seoul. Did you ever have a chance to do that?
No, I never did. I know some of them that did. I would have liked to. I'd like to have gone back to Beppu there, that Japanese city where I was stationed, but no. I don't know if it was because I was a medic or what. They figured medics didn't need to rest and recuperation.
Well, I would think you guys would need it just as much as some of the other people. But so while you were over there, you didn't sustain any injuries or anything while you were over there? Not ever captured or anything like that?
We did have some casualties, but no, I didn't. I was extremely lucky. The only I lost some good friends, but no, I didn't have any. I didn't sustain any. Even though we used to call him Bed Check Charlie. It was an old biplane, and we didn't know whether he was Korean or South North Korean or Chinese, but about dusky dark, and he'd just fly just barely over the ground, and he'd come over the mountain, and you couldn't shoot at him, but you didn't know he was coming in there till he was on you, and then when he did, he'd drop hand grenades, and we called him mortar shells on us. We called him Bed Check Charlie. About once or twice a week he'd be in our area, but no, I didn't sustain any injuries. I wasn't a prisoner of war. Tell you the truth, I just had somebody looking over me.
Sounds like
I came through it, and I'm thankful for that.
Right. Do you remember where you were when the old bed check Charlie was flying around? Do you remember what part of Korea that was?
No, I don't, because over there weren't towns. As a matter of fact, the second time we went through Seoul was gone. We didn't know about towns or anything else. We'd close the trails on the guns and hook them up to trucks. We'd take off down the road, across the field or something, and then someplace else, and then they'd drop the deals and open the trails and dig them in and everything. And I never knew where we were. I knew we were in North Korea. As a matter of fact, when I finally got ready to come home, we were on a little, across the river, the Han River from Seoul, up on the river, on a hill there, and we were in South Korea when I was due to come home, or when I got orders to come home. But I never knew where we were, or towns, names, or anything else. Now, I knew when we went through Seoul. You couldn't miss that. But outside of that, I couldn't tell you. I do know that this Pakyung-ya, we were, the thing is stabilized then, and we were just sitting there. And we were up on a hill, and there was this little girl who would come up from the river.
Little Korean girl?
Little Korean girl. I remember her name, Pakyung-ya. 8 or 10 years old. She'd come up and we'd give her candy and stuff and everything else. And I remember the name. She lived in Annam-dong. I've got my little black book of where she wrote in it, but she was kind of a mascot and everything. Outside of that, I wasn't around any, and the Koreans, of course, that were assigned to that one for each gun. Most of those spoke English, though, so it was. I didn't have any civilian friends over there. There just weren't that many
around.
They were all scared to death or hiding or something.
Sure.
But that little girl.
So did you see her just about every day, or?
Well, just about every day.
Really?
I guess I don't know how many people were down there in that little town, but she was the only one that came up.
So she came up by herself?
Yeah, she'd come up there, and she was, like I said, 8 or 10 years old. She'd come up there, and I don't know what got her started. I guess she was out wandering around, or maybe one of the fellows went down there or something. I don't know, but I never did. But yeah, she'd come by 4 or 5 times a week and get her a candy bar, or if somebody had some sea rations left over or something, well, they'd give her. She didn't speak English, but she was a sweet little girl.
Well, you had mentioned home a minute ago. That reminds me. How often did you keep touch with people back home, like your wife or any other family members?
Yeah, just the wife. I do remember the worst thing about it was when we had sea rations. There'd be some toilet paper and some paper, but the worst thing was just paper. And I never will forget, I ran out of paper and I wrote a letter to my wife then on toilet paper. And
wow.
She kept that for the longest time. I don't know where it is now, but and it was we were under fire at the time because with the battery for anti-aircraft and what have you, they had twin 40s caliber 40 millimeter guns for anti-aircraft, but attached to the battery. And we were coming out onto a dirt road, and there was a mountain up there, and they would sit there at that junction and they'd fire every time they'd see somebody up on top of that mountain, so that we could get out on the street. That was it was that same bunch that we were sitting one time, and they got hold of some crab apples. and some raisins, and had those jerry cans that were white line thing for water, and they put those apples and those raisins in there and some water and some yeast and flopped it down, and everybody was waiting for it to get good. Well, it got good, because when it did, it broke that glass inside that jerry can and everything. And anyway, they wanted us all to try it, so I took my canteen cup over there and they poured me a little of it in it. I switched it around. When it did, it turned that canteen cup black. So, I don't know if anybody ever drank it in that. Oh, they were they were desperate, I guess.
I guess so.
But they had the Air Force every now and then, the pilots would smuggle in booze, and flyboys would keep some of them, or they'd get it up to the front, but very seldom. You had to do without.
So did you write home very often while you were over there?
Tried to at least once a week, but you couldn't always do it.
Right.
Mainly because of lack of paper, but also the fact that you were busy, and getting mail was just as bad, because I know one time, my wife always wrote me and paid a nickel for air mail, and my dad, bless his old soul, he was a penurious kraut. He'd mail me, he'd put a 3-cent stamp on it, and of course it'd take a month to get across it. He said, "Well, you got it." I said, "Yeah, I got it." But the time I got it, it was already passed and something else happened. No, it wasn't. If I got it 2 or 3 a month, well, I was doing good. Or if I received that many or more, I was doing good. 11 months.
So, we had talked about interaction with the Korean civilians a little bit. Did you ever have any contact or interaction with any of the Allied forces over there?
Yes, at one time, that's when I was still an outpost sergeant. The Turks, and they were all hand-picked. They looked like they were all 7 foot tall. But anyway, the Turks were, and I don't remember whether it's to the left or right of us at the time, but the Chinese loved to sit down there and build bonfires and blow bugles and I guess get high on dope, because I went into a Chinese medic's bag one time and all they had was rice and dope. But anyway, they had these big old aircraft searchlights that they would set up behind the battery, and they'd shine up on the clouds, and it would be reflected down, so that when those fellows down those foxholes on the side of that hill could see. And we Chinese started up the hill hollering and blowing bugles and everything else, and we saw light flashes over there, and we couldn't believe it, because it wasn't rifle fire. Those Turks got up out of their holes with their sabers, and what it was, them sabers reflected light, and it looked like guns flashing, but it wasn't. They nuts, instead of sitting there and mowing them down, they got up and they went down the hill after. They broke them. I mean, I guess it was.
I'm sure the Chinese were very surprised to see that.
Yeah, we were next to some British one time, because as a medic, I was my way to, in the first place, the medic got to cut hair, and I had a pair of those old squeeze slippers, but they were dull. I think I pulled more out than I cut, but pulled hair, and then also cigarettes. And back when you were choosy, you had cigarettes. Well, they did swap anything for Lucky Strikes and Camels and Chesterfield. But then when we got off the sea rations, well, then no more cigarettes. Well, what I'd do is I'd take those cigarettes like that, and I'd swap them. They'd swap me 2 for 1. Well, then I'd took them to the British, and they thought any cigarette we had was better than what they were getting. Capstan Navy cuts, and they came in a metal can, and there were 50 of them. And he had swapped me a can of 50 for a package of 20 cigarettes. Well, when the going got rough, even those Capstan Navy cuts were better than rice straw and toilet paper. So that was part of my job as a medic, was to make everybody happy.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't make it happy when I cut their hair.
Yeah, I'm sure that was probably the case. So you said you were over there 11 months, so that would have put you leaving, around August?
Well, my memory. Okay, 9/3/50, I was ordered to Korea, and in 8/20/51, I was transferred to the zone of interior for discharge.
Okay. So, I guess by that point there had been at least some talks about the ceasefires and peace talks going on. Did you?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
I don't remember any. I know the line was static, so I guess something had been happened. But there again, like I say, we were a artillery battery, and I was a private,
right,
or PFC, and what do we know? But no, I don't remember anything. The line was static when I was telling you about Pakyang. The line was static then because we had been there,
right,
I guess several weeks or so.
Yeah. So maybe not at that point when things were static, but before then when things were a lot more active. What would you say a typical day would have been like if there was such a thing as a typical day?
Well, I don't know what a typical day would be. Of course, my typical day as a fire controlman, my typical day as a outpost sergeant, and a typical day as a medic were completely different.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But the last part, probably the last 6 months, was a medic. I set up my pup tent and my sleeping bag, and you'd get up and then you'd go to the mess truck or get your C rations out according to what you had at the time. Eat when you could. Try to find some water someplace. And I got some advice for anybody that visits Korea. If you go to a Korean house and you go out in the yard and there's a ceramic jar lid out in the yard, you lift that jar lid up, and what's buried down in there is what they call kimchi. Now, I don't know what that is that they shouldn't you can buy in the supermarket over here. But we got hungry and we tried that kimchi, and I'll tell you what, that stuff would burn you a new one. I don't know what they put in there, but yeah, that's because we'd be around houses that were, disabled, and the only thing you could find would be these things out in the yard where they were making their food. Another thing that I was very impressed with was over there they had the where they cooked on one end of the house, and they usually have mud, of course, floor and everything, and they had two pots there where they cooked in. Well, they built their fire, but the flue was on the other side of the house. So that fire went underneath that mud floor and up the flue.
Really?
And it kept that floor warm. And believe me, I know it was warm because we'd find one that even the top of it was gone. You could build a fire in the end of that and sleep on it, and it was nice. But as a typical day, you just ate what you could when you could. If you were on B rations, you got the C truck. You got the truck, I mean. When they hollered, you ate. In the wintertime, I do remember that, and this can get kind of gross, but weren't many chances to take a shower. As a matter of fact, it was so doggone cold, it was hard to even drop your britches. So anyway, sometimes you get a chance where you'd take them out and you'd bang them up against the wall for a very good reason. That's gross, but that's a fact of life. When it's that cold and the wind's blowing hard, you just make do.
Yeah, wow.
I remember that. Every now and then, though, I don't know who did it, but they'd set up a tent, and they'd have a heater there and everything, and they'd shires, and you could go by and shire, and but that was once every 2-3 weeks.
Right.
So we weren't the cleanest smelling much. But you didn't notice it.
No, because
everybody else was.
That's what I was going to say. So, is there anything that really kind of just, I don't know, stands out about your time in Korea? I mean, is there anything that's just, when you think of your experiences over there, it's the first thing that you think of, or is it just kind of a mixture of medley of things?
No, really. At the time I was upset, scared, whatever you want to call it. I'm glad I was there. I'll have to say that much. I think we were there for a good reason, because if it hadn't been, it'd been like Vietnam. The whole island the whole peninsula would be communist, and it isn't now. Unlike Vietnam. Luckily, we were able to prevail, kind of. There was times when you're scared. There's times when there are fun. I know we had a fellow, Omer Name. He was an Irishman. And he came over here, and and next thing you know, he was in the Army. And
he was in the American Army.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, if you look at those pictures, he's the one standing there next to the black fella that's got a sword in his hand. That's Omer.
I remember that.
Omer Name. He was an Irishman. And then we had, you asked about in that deal about the black folks. We only had one. His name was Lemon, I think. Lemons or Lemon. He was a heck of a nice fella.
Yeah. So you didn't have, were there any problems in the unit with it? You know, the Army had just recently been integrated.
I remember, no, under those conditions, black, white, green, yellow, purple, it doesn't make any difference. I guess the only time you can afford to be racist or whatever it is when you're leisure. You're at your leisure and you're well fed and you got money in your pocket, then you can afford to be against somebody. But when everybody is dependent on everybody else, it doesn't make a difference what color it is. Those rock soldiers, they did their, they were yellow, but they did their job, and I was awfully glad of it. They were good friends of ours. I just like over in Japan. Yes, Japanese did some terrible things during the Second World War, but I had some real good friends over there. Ono Kiko-san was, I met his family. He was a well-known architect in Japan, and he was designing these bachelor's office quarters for us. I had the two fellows, Murakami and Kudo. They were good friends of mine. I didn't make many friends in town because they were mostly wanting soap or cigarettes. But those three, and I met their families, but like I say, under circumstances like that, you can't afford to be, what do you want to call it, racist or biased or whatever you call it. I never had any problem, and there weren't any problems in ours. He was a character, granted. Yeah. But he was a good man. Yeah. I believe his name is Lemon.
I think I remember seeing that on those photos, that one photo in particular. Do you have any thoughts or feelings or opinions? There was a lot when the war was going on. There was a lot of debate going on, both in the military and then back within the government back home, about what we should do about the Chinese, in the sense that, should we bomb Manchuria? Should we, attack the Chinese homeland? Do you think that would have been a good idea at the time, or would that have been crazy?
I don't know. I like I say, I was just a PFC. I was right. But no, I don't think that. Matter of fact, to me, once they got the North Koreans back across the line, and they ought to sit there and build a daggone Great Wall of China or Great Wall of Korea and stop there.
Right.
It would have saved a lot, to me, it would have saved a lot of time, but like I say, I wasn't the powers that be, so I had no control over it. But I think it was wrong when they decided, well, they invaded, so what we're going to do is we're going to invade them. Well, two wrongs don't make a right.
You know, there was even talk for a while of using the atomic bomb on them.
Well, no, because I know people now are fussing at us because we used the atomic bomb on Japan, but at the time, they were Japanese were prepared to defend their homeland, and they figured they were going to lose hundreds of thousands of GIs.
Oh, yeah.
More than what was killed by the atomic bomb.
Sure, yeah.
But to me, that was justified. But no. Now, if China had threatened us, then I say, well, tit for tat. But no, I don't think that would have been right.
Yeah. So did you have any? I know you said you were just a private, but I'm sure a lot of guys had an opinion one way or another of General MacArthur. Did you have any thoughts on him?
Well, of course, one time I was in the Daiichi building, which in Tokyo, which was headquarters and service group, general headquarters, Far East Command, MAC. I never saw him. I never saw him in Korea. But I do know that when he was the general, I think he was more interested in what the papers back home were saying about him. After all, he did run for president later, but I think he was more interested in that than he was getting the job done. And as a result, we'd go up valleys, secure the valley, but we didn't secure the mountaintops. So when we got through there, our MASH units down there had to wear sidearms and everything else, which, by the way, I was a medic, but I carried a sidearm.
I noticed that in some of those pictures you had a sidearm, and I was wondering why that was.
That's because North Korea never signed the Geneva Convention. And they knew that you put that big thing on your deal, that was a target. They knew that hurt the morale of the GIs for their medic to be killed. So they targeted medics. So no, we didn't wear the armband, and I carried a sidearm. But there again, when MacArthur was there, they'd come down off the hilltops after we went through and play heck with our rear. When he got gone and Matthew Ridgway took over, we not go 200 yards down that valley, but we went 200 yards down the mountaintops too. So after he took over, then we didn't have the trouble with the guerrillas behind us like we did when MacArthur was there. That's the only thing I know about MacArthur. I think he was more interested in his image than he was. There again, I was just a private.
Right. So you were a private the whole time that you were over there?
Well, yeah. I went in a private. Well, I made it to PFC.
Right.
One time I made it to corporal too while I was a Chaffee. But they were top heavy, so they left the pay very the same, but they moved everybody back up the deal. So I went back to PFC. But you got to remember, I told you I had the silk screen shop there at Chaffee. I had a 5-stripe sergeant pulling a squeegee. Ferguson. He was a 5-stripe sergeant. He was pulling the squeegee. I was doing the one telling him what to do, and he was pulling the squeegee. But they were so top heavy because the only people that stayed in after the Second World War were people that had rank.
Right, that makes sense.
So I was in there 3 years, and almost 4, and I never got any rank. Went in a private, came out of PFC.
Yeah. So when did we decide you came home from Korea? That was August of 51?
I got to read my deal.
That's okay.
Let's see, August 51, transfer to the zone of Victoria for discharge. Actually, I was on 9/22/51. I was released to the organized reserve.
And so what happened then? You came back to the States?
Came back to the States. I went home,
okay.
And you had to have 5 years or something. I don't remember what the law was then. But then finally in 12/13/51, I was finally completely discharged from the service, the reserves and all.
Right.
So on December the 13th, 1951, I was finally done with the Army.
Right. So what did you do once you came back home?
Well, of course, I went back to Paris, and couldn't find much job. Worked at Oklahoma Tire and Supply there on the square, I think on the west side of the square. I worked there for a while, and then I got a job working for Kirkendall Service Station at Coxville. I worked there for probably a couple of years. Kirk had a service station and cafe, all-night cafe. And I had the all-night. I went to work at 8 o'clock at night, and I got up at 6 in the morning, 7 days a week. But by golly, every week I had $37.50 a mile. So I figured that was, 70 hours for 30 cents. Well, here, over 50 cents a mile. But we lived on it.
Yeah.
Things were different back then. And the people of Paris were, they were good. They realized we were hard and going. They gave us credit, and a nice bunch of folks there.
So, well, I guess that kind of wraps up our conversation here, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us, and I have no doubt that other people will be very appreciative and glad that you seriously that you've decided to do this and taken this step to help preserve your memories.
Yeah, Brian, I appreciate it. Really, I was kind of flabbergasted because, like I say, it was a forgotten war, and I don't talk much about it. But I think it's a wonderful thing what you're doing. I think I just wish that I had from my brothers and everything. We always say, boy, I wish I'd thought about getting stories from my dad and mom and all that before they passed away. It's only after they're gone that you, all right, so after I'm gone, here it is.
There it is.
For that I'm thankful.
Right.